Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rem and Sam podcast. You were warned on Tuesday that Sam would be gone for the weekend edition. So shout out to our guy, Sam. It's his birthday week. We hope he's having a great time. It's well-deserved time off as we head into the NBA finals. But make no mistake, I don't think any podcast has ever said this before, but this might be the most boring episode of Rem and Sam ever. I mean, no Sam today, no NBA till Thursday, till almost a week from today. We're recording this Friday night as we usually do, but there's going to be 2 episodes of the Rem and Sam podcast before we get an NBA finals game. So I don't even think we want that. So I guess we just curl up in a ball and go wait for well, now I guess I was going to say wait for basketball to come back, but we got to be careful because I just looked over and we do have WNBA on in the background. So I guess we just got to curl up and watch WNBA until the NBA gets back. But we're getting the Liberty Mystics game here in the Midwest. That's what Ion is giving us. There was also a Wings game as well, too. Was it Wings Sun on Friday night? That was a national game, but we're getting the Liberty Mystics. And the Mystics are doing Washington proud right now, maintaining the proud name of Washington sports teams. And I think are at like a winless season at this point. We can double check that, but they are hanging in there with the Liberty, who, like, of course, we all expect are one of the better teams in the WNBA. And the Mystic have definitely had their moments. They've looked at, Aaliyah Edwards, was it 5th overall pick in the draft this year, has definitely flashed a little bit and has looked pretty impressive. So yeah, they're 0-7 headed into tonight's game against the Liberty. And as the season's going to play out, it's going to be like, okay, why did Angel Reese fall to 7 in the WNBA draft after being one of the best players in the women's college basketball for several years and leading LSU the way she did? But Aaliyah Edwards was and I had necessarily no problem with a team having Aaliyah Edwards higher on their board, but I would have seen it either way. I think I would have, like we all know, taken Angel Reese, but I do like Aaliyah Edwards' game, and she's had some moments here tonight. But like we said, no NBA for a while, but we will be previewing the finals on Tuesday's pod. So I guess we'll still be watching basketball. We're going to hunker down and try to rewatch some of the Boston Mavericks regular season games, get ready for the finals, see what's going on. And I guess basketball is I don't even know if last night's game counts as a game. Yeah, we're just warming up, folks. Welcome to the Rem and Sam pod. But the Mavs definitely took care of business last night against the Timberwolves. And I mean, in the first quarter, Doncic was like, I think he hits like 2 28-footers right away. And it's like, okay, Edwards definitely, it's Luka Doncic. You definitely need to be up in his space, but it's also, first go. Like, I'm not, things definitely got out of hand. The Timberwolves should have definitely been more locked in, but Doncic and Kyrie were definitely incredible. And, it was the score was definitely bigger than what it should have been, but I think the Mavs clinching in game 6 with the way the series had been playing out wasn't necessarily surprising. But like I said, we're going to try to figure out some matchup stuff and see what's going on and see if we can try to predict a little bit what's going to happen in the finals on the Tuesday pod. But there was a couple of storylines that were being brought up between the Mavs and the Celtics that I wanted to mention first. And Stephen A was talking a lot about Kyrie as they were talking about this today on First Take, actually, as the best co-star of all time. And it's like, okay, we get that First Take is trying to it's a debate show. They're trying to have a conversation. I'm not saying that that's a bad topic or anything like that. And, best co-star of all time. It's a little aggressive, obviously. Thinking about some of the teams that have won titles, like there have been guys where it's like, I don't even know if you could call them co-stars, but that's like, there's been 2 superpower guys on a team at one time. So somebody's got to be the co-star in that situation. But you get like the Magic Kareem tandem, Steph and KD, obviously, LeBron and Wade, Shaq and Kobe. It's like, okay, Shaq and Kobe, it's like, okay, Shaq is definitely the one in that scenario. But by the end, and then just, at the peak of their powers, the best version of those players, it's like, okay, either one could have been like a number one on a title team. Kobe obviously was 2 times with Pau Gasol in the mix. But like Oscar and Wilt as well too. But I guess Oscar didn't necessarily win, or not Wilt, sorry, Kareem. I guess he didn't necessarily win without Kareem, but man, he sure definitely had the vibe of a number one guy. But so I guess if we're talking about Kyrie in that mix, maybe that's where the list starts. It's like, okay, is it Kyrie versus Oscar Robertson at that point? Because that's a tough one for doing the all-time comparison. You've also got, speaking of Wilt, I was thinking of Jerry West, also in that era where he never was able to win the title until Wilt got there. Gail Goodrich was on that team. Baylor was on that team, unfortunately, up until the season that they had won the ring. But, he had carried his team to the finals quite a few more times than Kyrie had. So it feels like he is, again, in like a different kind of player. But I understand what is being said when that is being brought up, because the first guy that you mentioned when you think of, okay, number two, like sidekick guy on a title team, obviously is Scottie Pippen to MJ. And like we're saying, okay, Scottie Pippen is not Kareem and Magic, like whatever year it is. Even if you're doing like Scottie versus like, Kevin McHale or like Havlicek. I get Havlicek won a ring on his own, but there's some other, he's definitely in the mix as like a top 50, top 40. I got to be careful throwing out numbers, but all 75 team, definitely one of the best players of all time, but definitely, a number two on a title team. And that's no disrespect to Scottie Pippen, but like the more I watch basketball, obviously, and the more you see this stuff, like there is a certain talent to being a number two on a title team like that. And yeah, you can get the superstar pairings where it is just too overwhelming, and Steph and KD, they're great players. And that is special too, and to their credit, both of those players are players that are malleable players. I guess all of the guys too, now that I think about it, are on that team are kind of malleable. LeBron, Wade, maybe you wouldn't necessarily think, but he did, like that team was able to pull off back-to-back titles, and they were in four titles in a row. But, so and that's one of the reasons why those guys are special talents, is because it's like, okay, there is basically no basketball situation where just Kevin Durant doesn't work. Or even Steph for that matter. I get some of the switching on defense, but even I'll defend that. So, I get the malleability thing with Kyrie and with Scottie, and with being that number two in the title team. But again, Kyrie hasn't necessarily led a team to the title, but in a different way, like compared to these other guys, he's been a number two now on two different court with two different main guys. So, Kareem won it on his own in Milwaukee with Oscar. And then, him and Magic obviously did their thing in LA. I guess Shaq as well too. Shaq won it as, the number one in LA, and then went to Miami with Wade as the number two. But again, we're kind of talking about that, like, that just that different class of player, that kind of like strictly number two. And again, I don't want that to sound like disrespectful by calling him a strictly number two, because the whole point of this is like, it is like a very, very special role. But the reason I think the more I've been thinking about it today, as they were bringing that up, it's like, okay, again, that is aggressive to say he's the best co-star of all time, but just him in that mix versus a guy like Scottie Pippen, it's like, okay, if you're putting him next to the number two or next to the number one guy, so the number two option is probably going to be getting some more favorable matchups. Well, we know Kyrie has been, just basically his entire basketball career, all, regarded for, and, all the great players are regarded for their skill, but just the other players have held Kyrie in a different regard. And, as he's continued to get better throughout the course of his career, just his overall one-on-one ability as a number two player, like I'm saying, his one-on-one ability versus any defender is special in general. But when you put him in that number two role, and now he's got the, sometimes more favorable matchups with the teams having to focus on LeBron, Luka Doncic, or, if you're Scottie Pippen, like focusing on MJ, so, all-time great players, but, Luka is on his way. He's definitely pacing out to be that. But, if you're going to be in these favorable, and you just got this all-time gifted one-on-one player, and we have seen Kyrie as well, too, like step up defensively this playoff season, where, it is a little bit Stephish, where, he's not he's not Edwards. You're not going to throw him on Jamal Murray to take him down. But if you have other perimeter defenders that you trust, and you need those guys off, and if you're making a title run, you need your perimeter defenders to shoot three. You need a guy like KCP. But if you have perimeter defenders that you can trust, that you can throw on the other team's guys, then you can make it work with Kyrie. He's not going to be a liability if he puts in the effort, which is a big thing for most guys. But just the more I was thinking about, like, okay, yeah, if he is just this special as a one-on-one guy, and like he's proving over the course of this playoffs, and I think him doing it with two separate things is special too. And it's a credit to Scottie and to credit to these guys. Like, the league is different as well too. I do understand that. Like, that is important to bring up. Like, Scottie made sacrifices to stay in Chicago, but if he leaves MJ, and that's MJ at the peak of his powers, maybe it's a little bit different. But it is a credit now that he's done it with two different types of players. And again, the two players that I mentioned, LeBron, the second greatest player of all time, or maybe the first, if Shannon Sharpe ever decides to call in. And then like Luka Doncic is maybe putting up the greatest like under 25 career that any player has ever seen as well too. So it's not like Kyrie hasn't been super fortunate with the teammates that he's been with. But the other piece I was thinking about it too is, he was injured a lot on that Brooklyn team. So I know that, that Brooklyn team had much other reasons outside the health of those guys that they weren't able to compete. But, even Harden as well too was able, I think, to survive a couple more playoff rounds barely in Brooklyn than Kyrie was. Kyrie in 2020, 2021, 9 playoff games, and then played 4 playoff games in the 21-22 season. And that was the season, the one that he played 9 games, that was the one where they end up losing to Milwaukee, Game 7, Durant's foot on the line. That was probably the best, like the best version of that Nets team. Obviously, fully healthy is the most fully healthy version of that team is going to be the best version. But if Kyrie had managed to stay healthy even more so than Harden, and you just have Kyrie and Durant as the 1-2, even in that series, like, I wonder what Milwaukee happens. And then that's the one where Milwaukee goes on to win the title. So you got Milwaukee playing Atlanta in the Eastern Conference Finals. Could Durant and Kyrie take down Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter? I mean, Atlanta doesn't even have Jalen Johnson at that point to throw on KD. And then, the Phoenix thing is much more interesting in the finals. And like, let's not forget, Giannis just went insane and was like, I don't think it was quite like 50-20, but he was 50, 40-point games, insane two-way performances, deservedly finals MVP, and just one of the most dominant runs that we've seen from a player, and really took over in that finals. So I'm not saying Durant could have gone to that level, but, I'm just saying we saw Giannis do it. So that would have to be in question when we're talking about that playoff series. But I do wonder what that Brooklyn thing, like, that Brooklyn situation would have been like if I had to pick one of the two now, obviously going looking back in time, I think I would pick Kyrie to stay healthy over Harden. I guess I've never really like asked myself that question before, but I just feel like with Harden's status as league MVP, even after the Philly run last year. So maybe, is it just prisoner of the moment? Who's ever making the better playoff run? Where last year you've got Dallas is tanking to try to save their pick. It ended up with the 10th pick in the draft, which is honestly like not one of the best things that happened to this team because it got lively. Now they're making the playoff push. And I know the trade deadline and getting Gafford and PJ Washington was a big part in retooling and making this run, but lively as well too. I mean, that's kind of being the big three, at least in the Minnesota series when he was on the court. There's, some big three vibes. We have a lot of Derek Lively stock here on the Rem and Sam pod, but where you've got Harden at least with Embiid, and not, I guess that would have been not all of the season. He would have been traded at some point, but or no. Let me double check. I'm forgetting what the Harden Philly run was like. It's all blurred together when he was in and when he was out. He played 21 games. So he was traded to Philly in the 2021 season from Brooklyn. And then, it was 11 games for Philly in the playoffs last year. So yeah, that's right. He was there for yeah. Now that he had the couple 40-point games against the Celtics, and that was kind of with Embiid's health was one of the reasons that the series went 7 games. But again, I don't know if it's prisoner of the moment to pick Kyrie over Harden, but this is now 2-5. Harden's never been to a finals, and Kyrie has now been the number 2 guy on, and Harden on his career has had more responsibility. So I guess I didn't mean to turn this into a Kyrie versus James Harden debate, but if now looking back, if I had to choose, I would be more curious at this point to see what that Durant and Kyrie combo could have done. And that was the kind of the 2 guys that wanted to be together and pause in the first place when they first went to Brooklyn. That was the original tandem star duo. Those were the guys that were originally joining up. So the Kyrie legacy thing has obviously been a complete 180, but that's also been on Kyrie as well too, to do his part, not just on the court but off the court, to make sure that narrative has shifted. So shout out to Dallas and the insane run that they've had for taking care of Minnesota. And for the Celtics now, back to the finals. And again, who knows if they'll end up winning the finals. Like I said, we'll dig into the tape to see if we can come up with an official prediction. But just the fact that they're back in it, and it's no surprise that to say like the Celtics have been like a pretty consistent franchise. But I was thinking about it again. I was thinking about this today as well when I was at work, just busting tables. But this is now 4 like core groups that the Celtics have put together, 4 iterations of the team that have been to the finals multiple times. So again, they didn't win the finals the first time that this Tatum and Brown team went there versus the Warriors. And there is absolutely no guarantee that they're going to win the finals at this point. And the Mavs might, like I said, once we watch the tape, and even after watching this playoffs, the Mavs might be our pick, but they might just be the better bet anyways for being the underdogs and just having the better value. But just the fact that they've made multiple finals appearances is pretty impressive in itself. And again, the Celtics, just as a, like which franchises have the rich basketball history to go along with just, the names. It's like, okay, yeah, we know that the legacy of the Russell teams, the Bird teams, but you kind of forget that there was that little Havlicek Cowens run in there as well too. Unfortunately, Cowens only won 2 titles as the main guy, whereas you got Bird with 3, or was Bird 2? Let's double check the Bird quick. I know Bird was 3 MVPs, but was he 3 or 2 titles? And then, Russell obviously blowing everybody out of the water with 11 titles. Yeah, 3 finals for Larry Bird, 2 finals MVPs, because you got to throw in the Cedric Maxwell. I don't remember what year that was, but you get the random Cedric Maxwell finals MVP in there as well. But you get all 4 of those teams now. And like I was saying, this Tatum Brown team in the finals multiple times. So, I don't know if they lose the finals, there's going to be drama about how this core didn't work. But it's like, okay, this core, in a sense, it did work. It's just like, do they have that last little step? And I don't even know if it's, the on the court stuff or the mental stuff or whatever. But, if Luka's at the, if somebody's at the free throw line and Luka's lined up next to Tatum ready to box out, and he's in his ear, like we've seen in all the other playoff series in the Western Conference, are Tatum and Brown going to be able at the end of games to be able to close this one out? And, the Celtics have the deep supporting cast. We get all that. But, like we're saying, this core is now, it's like, okay, this core is clearly capable of winning the title. They've been to the finals twice. They're in the conference finals, NBA and conference finals every year. They clearly, quote unquote, have what it takes, but it is just those few separating degrees that, as like we're saying, in a sort of a changing of the guard year for the league, we'll see if it's either Tatum or Luka who's able to get those degrees of separation. But I was looking at some of the other teams as well too that had that many just different versions of the team go to multiple different finals appearances. And don't be surprised, it's only really the Lakers and the Celtics as the only 2, especially with 4 as well too. I mean, and to go back that far as to include like And, not to say that the Russell basketball thing is ancient history at this point. It's kind of like, it's not ancient history, but it's like medieval history, Renaissance. Maybe it's like Renaissance period history, a little far back, but we're like, okay, clearly we're starting to see industrial age, where it's like, okay, clearly we're starting to see the turn of like into the modern world, and the gap between the jump between the Renaissance and the industrial age is, I think, a lot bigger than the gap between the medieval ages and the Renaissance age. But regardless, going back into the medieval days of basketball, if we're including those years into the conversation, then yeah, it kind of is only the, no surprise, Lakers and Celtics as the teams that have done that. Where the Lakers, you've got the Mikan teams, you've got the West teams going to the finals a ton. The West Chamberlain combo, I think, only went to the finals one time together. I could be wrong about that. We'll double check here quick. But West himself, and Baylor, Elgin Baylor, they carried that team to the finals multiple years in a row. So, oh no, yeah, they lost okay, I was wrong. They lost the first they lost in the finals the first year that Wilt got to LA. And then outside of the year they won the finals, that was their only other appearance. So I guess, 4.5 combos if we want to give the Elgin Baylor, Jerry West combo some love as well too, for going to multiple finals appearances. And then you get the Shaq Kobe combo. And then, another half combo, I guess, he gets a little overlap with Kobe and Pau Gasol, Kobe winning his 2 titles, like we mentioned earlier. And then, if we're talking again, like who has the rich basketball history for these franchises, Detroit has also had 3 groups that have made multiple finals appearances. Not all of them have won it. So you got the Isaiah Thomas, they won back-to-back. Chauncey Billups and their group, they only won 1 title. And then, multiple conference finals appearances. And they lost, unfortunately. Unfortunately for Pistons fans, not unfortunately for Spurs fans. They lost to Tim Duncan and Ginobili and those guys. But again, if we're going back to the medieval times, and I'm not saying technically, I shouldn't say we technically have to count these guys, but if we technically have to count these guys, shout out George Yardley, the old Fort Wayne Pistons, one of the OG scorers in the league. George Yardley, he put up like 27 points a game back in, like, and I know that, Wilt was putting up like 50 points a game, so nothing's going to seem impressive to what Wilt was doing. But I know Yardley's scoring total was pretty impressive. 27.8 points a game in 57-58. Unfortunately, was not enough to win the MVP over, of course, Bill Russell. And then Dolph Schayes. Shout out Dolph Schayes in second place for the MVP of the 57-58 NBA season. And George Yardley, unfortunately, was the one that was not able to win the title. I think he might have actually lost to Dolph Schayes that year. Let me double check that. I know he lost one of the finals, one of the years, to Dolph Schayes. I just don't remember if it was the year that Dolph Schayes won the MVP. And then they lost to the Philadelphia Warriors the next year. Not the Chamberlain, not when Chamberlain was there. You're going to have to forgive me for not having all my 50s basketball knowledge totally in check. I think he would have been in the league in like the 60s, so I don't think he would have been there at this point. But this would have been the Paul Azarian Warriors. Tom Galla, I believe, also a Hall of Famer in his own right. So unfortunately for Pistons fans, they were able to unseat the George Yardley Fort Wayne's Pistons. But like we said, multiple titles appearances. So is Tatum the modern day George Yardley? Who knows? We'll see if he loses this title. Now, he won't have the back-to-back, but he'll have the 2 appearances and the 2 losses like our guy Yardley. And then speaking of Dolph Schayes, Philadelphia. So I said, they were the Philadelphia Warriors, but that Philadelphia, they eventually become the Sixers, and then, San Francisco, the Warriors. Teams are moving around. It's confusing, but Dolph Schayes is in the Sixers history of guys. So technically the Sixers as well too have 2 versions of the team that have made multiple titles appearances with Dolph Shays, and then the Dr. J Moses combo made multiple finals, as well as Dr. J making some finals on his own. Wilt was in a finals for Philly at some point, and then Iverson obviously made the one finals, but not like we were saying with the Celtics and the Lakers, the multiple finals. Those guys were only sneaking in one time for those respective franchises. Wilt, like we said, was also in the finals with the Lakers, just to make sure, if you're keeping notes, just to make sure everything's in check. But like, but like the Bulls with MJ, there's 6 titles, but again, only with MJ. The Warriors, multiple titles with Steph, and then that Arazian team made the finals once. Will only made the finals once for that team. Rick Barry made the finals like 2 different times for the Warriors, but like 2 separate cores. And I want to say like almost like 10 years apart for the Warriors. San Antonio was in the finals mostly with, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili. You get like a Tim Duncan, David Robinson combo for 1 year, and then it shifts a little bit into the Tony, Manu, and then you get the Kawhi Leonard run. But again, mostly the big 3 with San Antonio. And then, a bunch of other franchises have been in the finals with the Knicks have been in the finals with, they won the finals with the Frazier Reed combination. And then we're in the finals with the Pat Ewing teams. And then, the non-Pat Ewing team, but the Latrell Sprewell team was completely different from like the John Stark, Charles Oakley team. It was, Sprewell, Larry Johnson. I think was Mark Jackson on those Knicks teams that made them. I think Doc Rivers as well too might have been on that Knicks team that made the finals. And then, the Mavs, you get like Dirk and Luka, 2 separate cores, but for now, Luka's only at 1 finals. And then I guess Dirk made 2 finals. So if Luka makes another finals, because Dirk would have lost to the Mavs, so you got, or didn't lose to the Mavs, lost to the Heat, but you would have, if Luka makes another finals, you have Luka and Dirk, and I guess the Mavs would be a multi-franchise, multi-finals team. But all that being said, shout out to the Celtics. We get it. They're models of consistency for an NBA team, but they do kind of secretly need a title for, the Boston sports thing, because they've kind of slipped behind a little bit compared to some of the other teams. And I don't know if, any of the other prominent Boston sports people have pointed this out. I'm sure they have, but, since that last Larry Bird finals win, and I was at the 86-87 season. So, like the last 35 plus years for Boston sports, the Patriots, and, it's mainly Brady, but the Patriots are out in front with 10 championship appearances, 6 titles. The Red Sox are 4 for 4 in that stretch, I believe, in World Series. And you got the Bruins, 5 appearances to the Celtics, 3 appearances, but both of them only have 1 title since that Larry Bird title as well, too. You got the Pierce team for the Celtics, and then I have no idea who was on that Bruins team. I guess we could double check. Looking up this Bruins team to see when they had won the Stanley Cup was the first time I think I'd ever been on the hockey, the pro football hockey reference page. And it would have been the 10-11 season. I don't even know if I would even know of a player that was on here. Gregory Campbell, Patrick Bergeron. I feel like he might have been pretty good. Oh, okay. We can look at the goals. Yeah, 20. Is that 22 goals? Is that Horton with 26, or is that games? I could be stupid. 26. Okay, Milan Lucic. Okay, Bergeron with 57 points for Bergeron, 3rd in scoring. Nate Horton, 4th in scoring with 53 points. I was looking at games earlier with on a different stat column. But I guess anyway, shout out to the 2010-2011 Bruins team. But Boston would have a leg up on them anyways with championships. I know, less appearances, but 2 titles. Titles is what counts. They would move back in. They would take over the Bruins. I don't even know if the Bruins are probably not above the Celtics, but tied for terms in terms of titles. And I would assume the Celtics have been, I was going to say, I would assume they've been more consistent contenders, but again, 5 appearances for the Bruins would say the Bruins have been more consistent contenders. I just don't know if they were the Bruins tanking in the seasons outside of the championship seasons. Slide in the DMs, any of our hockey fans. They can catch us up on the hockey knowledge. But again, we'll wait for the Tuesday pod to make official picks and see which direction we want to go with it. But we did want to do a vibe check for all of the teams that got eliminated from the playoffs this year in the NBA. So I've got them ranked and this is like my own own personal vibe for how I'm feeling about these teams at this point going into the offseason. So, there is a little, well, obviously it's all projecting, I guess, but there is a little, with like some of the specific moves, there could be a little projecting, but I guess, at this point, a team's capability to do something going into the offseason obviously does help out the vibe. So I guess it does matter. The vibe, see, we've got actual rules now for the vibe check headed into offseason 2024. IT, write that down. We can start keeping a list. But if we're ranking all of the teams that got eliminated from the playoffs, so we got East and West all in one list, and we're not including the Celtics and the Mavs because they're in the finals. So right now, both of those franchises are, maybe a little nervous, but I think both feeling pretty good. And I never know which way to do the list. I feel like Sam likes doing the list backwards, like working from 10 to 1. And I always like going from 1 to 10. We need to check the retention numbers and see what helps out. But like I said, I kind of like to count down. Or count up. Now I'm confusing myself. But if I had to go number 1 vibes going into the offseason of eliminated teams in the NBA, I might go the Thunder. Out of all the teams, again, East and West in one ranking. And, we're still not, and I'm saying I'm down on any of the other contender teams. I don't want to unveil the rest of the list, but, we'll get to it. There's still, like I said, some powerhouse teams to go here, but I think it's got to be OKC for me. Just the youth of that team and to see what Dallas did, to not just to Minnesota, but now, looking back on the course of their playoffs and then thinking about potentially what could happen in the NBA finals as well, too. Just, Luka and the big storyline, obviously, for Dallas, but the Luka Kyrie combo at the end of games, the end of game capability, the shot making, the clutchness from those two guys, where we've already seen Kyrie do it with LeBron, like we were saying it earlier. We're not surprised that Doncic is doing it in the NBA when he was doing it in, 13 years old in the Euro League. But to, go back and look at how close that series was. And there was a lot of series looking back at the playoffs that maybe weren't like all 7-game series, but the individual games, like, again, I don't want to say the list, but you got like that Sixers-Knicks series was, those games were nail biters every game. And I don't remember what the total point score was like, over the course of the series, but headed into game 6 for Mavs Timberwolves, and maybe it was headed into game 5, but there was a point in the series where the teams were separated by like 13 points. It was super close, even matchup. And just the end of the games, the Mavs and Luke and Kyrie were able to hit the shots to come out ahead. And same thing for the Thunder series. And, you could say, well, maybe that's not the best vibes going into the offseason. But again, taking into account the youth of OKC, the fact that this was, really Jalen Williams and Chet's first season ever, Jalen Williams' first shot at the playoffs, Shea's first shot in the playoffs as a lead guy, where Doncic and Shea are similar age. Shea actually might be a slight bit older than Doncic, but again, just the reps that Doncic has had at high level, it goes into his credit when we're talking about him and would you want to start a team. But I don't know if the degree of separation is so far off where it's like, okay, yeah, we know we can now, Luka can take a team to the title. I still think Shea can take a team to the title. So, does he need his team to be slightly better? Okay, well, the Thunder are that better team. So I still have good vibes about this core headed into the offseason. We know the cap space. We know the draft picks, and the draft picks is a trade. It is trade bait, obviously. So for this season, if they want to make a big trade, those draft picks could be beneficial. But even still, my guess is they won't make a humongous trade this offseason. They would want to do that next offseason. And maybe that's just being closer to that draft. The picks might become a little more spicy. You know, maybe we would even need to get to a point where we would know what those picks are set in stone, because there's some swaps and some protections as well too. So that does all go into play with that as well. But even if there's not big changes and they just kind of upgrade around the edges, bring in some good role guys like that, that could be enough. And, you know, obviously if they get the right spots, bring in some help for Chet, some defensive, some rebounding reinforcement, bring in some other backcourt option off the bench besides Josh Giddey. You know, you obviously have Cason Wallace, who maybe takes a step. You know, he's an elite defender, shooter already. Maybe he can continue to grow as a ball handler and maybe run the second unit a little bit more in his second season. But if they just upgrade around the edges and it's Shea taking another step and Jalen Williams with playoff reps and Chet with playoff reps, I think that's impressive. And again, the playoff reps that they got against this Mavs team, where this might be just one of the better end of game playoff teams that we've had. And, you know, I guess I feel like now I get deja vu last year to saying that about Denver. It can be, we can get, again, prisoner of the moment with this stuff. But, you know, to play against Doncic and Kyrie on that hot streak, and then let me pull the series back up here, because I know game one, I believe they lost by double digits ish. So that one, you know, the Mavs kind of won that one, but I feel like the rest of their losses were super close. So they won game one, obviously, by quite a bit, 95-117. Lost game two by 9. Game 3, they lost by 4. And that's the game where SGA misses a 3, and there's like a charge at the end of the game. Kyrie, in between both those possessions, hits a shot. So that's like a one possession game with like 90 seconds to go. They win the next game 100-96, and then they lose the next game 92-104, and then lose the season, lose game 6, the series clincher, 116-117. But again, just to be in those close game battle, to get that reps against the team. And I think what I just project as growth pause for this team going forward is, I think, a big step. And, you know, to do what they did in the regular season, just in general, as a team that young, is super impressive. That was the youngest 1 seed we've ever seen in the NBA. And to do it in a year this competitive, super impressive. So I know maybe 1 is a little too aggressive, considering, you know, the number 2 team and maybe even the number 3 team. I don't have this separated into tiers, but I mean, looking at the list, there are obviously definite tiers here. So, you know, all these teams here are still tier 1. It's not like OKC is in vibe check by tier by themselves. I got Denver right behind them at number 2. And the only reason at this point that I would have Denver at number 2, and don't worry, we won't do like a full offseason preview for all these teams. It's just, again, just vibe check where we're at after all these teams have been eliminated from the playoffs. But the only reason I would have Denver behind OKC at this point would be the KCP contract. He has a player option right now for $15 million. So maybe he's just super dedicated to that core and wants to run it back. You know, he got traded in the LA deal. And then did he get traded to Denver? I don't know if he got traded to Denver from the Lakers, but I think he was dealt to Denver eventually. So it's not like he's really left a ton of places. For a guy that's as good as he is, he's and I guess, you know, a lot of it's him being desired by teams. So yeah, traded in the Westbrook trade with a lot of other pieces, and then he traded to the Wizards from the Lakers, and then from the Wizards to the Nuggets for Will Barton and Monte Morris. KCP and Ish Smith for Will Barton and Monte Morris is like a sneaky great It's great. Will Barton was like a pretty good six man. I think, did he even win six man of the year at one point? He was definitely in the running. He didn't end up winning. Okay, he finished fourth twice. Not bad. For, a solid bench guy on Denver, and was an interesting score. So, was a fun piece that they moved on from. But again, KCP, his value is a role guy. What a win. But with a player option for 15 million, oh, he has the same Hall of Fame percentage as Drew Holiday at 0.1%. Let's double check that. Let's see if Drew Holiday's Hall of Fame percentage has gone up a little bit in this playoffs. Sidetrack really quickly, because I don't think that KCP. Oh, Drew Holiday's at 0.8%. Okay, my bad. He's definitely up a little bit. I think he was at 0.1% either this year or last year. But Drew Holiday on the steady up. But if KCP obviously could return to Denver on like a longer term deal, discount, get some longer security. But again, like we've seen his value as a role guy, especially right now, where it's like as a perimeter defender and as a shooter, and his size, he can guard a lot of positions. I'd be curious if a team wouldn't go like, we'll overpay you for like 2 years and do some kind of options sort of ordeal, because there's not a ton of teams with cap space. It would have to be like a contending team. Like I don't think he would just take the bag from the Jazz, for example, if they were throwing it at him. Like, the Jazz would obviously be a better team for bringing him in, but I just don't know if that's a move. Maybe he just would. Maybe he would. I don't know. At that point, I don't know. But if the teams that I was looking at were OKC, like we mentioned, vibe check number 1, they've got cap space, Philly, and then Orlando. So you got 3 contending teams where, again, if OKC wants to add around the edges and just go, or all of these teams have the ability to give this number, but if they just want to go like 2 for 40 and go $20 million a year, and we'll give you a raise and a little bit of a payday for a couple years, and you're going to do this role at an extremely high level. Like OKC already has Dort, again, Case and Wallace. There's quite a few front court guys. I'm just saying they're a contender with cap space that could bring in a role guy like that. And let's just say, like, worst case scenario, Paul George resigns, Pascal Siakam resigns, LeBron resigns, quickly, resign. Let's just say like all of the top free agents that Philly might be going after end up resigning. Well, what is plan B? KCP on this team, just in theory, is not bad. Now you go, okay, KC, we'd much rather have Paul George. But if you just get the idea of having Paul George out of your head and go, we could bring in KCP, yeah, that's probably an upgrade. Is KCP better than Tobias Harris at this point? And especially, Tobias, would you rather have KC, just straight up KCP at 2 years for 40 million, or Tobias Harris at 2 years for 40 million? It may be a question at this point, but I don't know. For me, it's kind of an easy answer. KCP has 2 rings, but again, if you bring in KCP, if you're Philly in this alternate, it's not even, I don't even think this is like a darkest timeline. This is just some plan D, plan E, plan. I feel like all these letters are bad letters to choose, but if you got KCP, you have room to bring in another kind of contract role player, high level role player guy. Could you just bring the Denver core that won the title to Philly around Embiid? Could you bring in KCP and Bruce Brown? I think, is that a team option or a player option for Bruce Brown? But if whatever happens with Bruce Brown's contract, is that and Tyrese Maxey and Embiid and Paul Reed, is that enough to win a title if you're Philly? It's a pretty good team. I like that team. Definitely around Embiid. Like I said, I really like KCP, but just because for me, there's a little uncertainty of what could happen there. And again, or I almost forgot to mention Orlando again, but Orlando as a potential KCP team, like they're rumored for Klay Thompson right now, is what I've been reading. And there was another name. Oh, D'Angelo Russell was the other name I read. So I don't know if there's like a big debate right now going on between Klay Thompson and D'Angelo Russell in the Magic front office. But just say both of those guys. Like, would you rather have both those guys or KCP? Would you rather have Klay Thompson or KCP at this point? KCP can play defense. KCP still guarding people. KCP probably shot higher 3-point percentage this year by far than Klay Thompson. We'll fact check that just to give Klay Thompson a chance, just to give the Splash Brother his due respect. He is one half of the greatest shooting backcourt of all time, but KCP was 40.6% this year. I do not think Klay Thompson was over 40. Unfortunately, he was 38.7. Honestly, a little higher than I would have guessed. I was going to say 37 or lower for Klay Thompson this season, but no, I got up to 38%, still lower than KCP in the defense. I don't know if you're Orlando, would you rather have KCP or Klay Thompson? But if you want to just say, oh yeah, Jokic, they're going to run it back, then Denver's probably number one. But again, I still think all these teams are pretty similar right now. Minnesota at number 3, just because, I mean, the defense, I was going to say what they did defensively to Denver in that series was super impressive. But I do think there was a mental aspect that they were just a level that they were able to get to where they had their chip on the shoulder going into that series. And for me, the reason I have Denver above them is because now I think Denver has that chip on the shoulder against Minnesota. But again, if you want to say the defense that Minnesota was playing on Denver in that series, just that's a bad matchup for Denver, especially because of the length they can throw with Jamal Murray. Pause. But I mean, I get that. But again, I think Denver having the chip on the shoulder at this point, making Jokic mad a little bit, I think is the reason I would have Denver in the vibe check over Minnesota headed into the offseason. But they'll probably run back most of the core as well, too. I think Conley is the one piece that is sort of lingering because Naz Reid is the better of the Reid twins. Naz Reid is under contract for at least one more season, maybe 2. I know we looked at that last week at Sam, but I just forget what it was. But I'd have Minnesota 3. And then I feel like this would be a drop into the next tier. But I would go the Knicks and the Sixers I had super close. And I would have the Sixers fairly above the Knicks at this point in the vibe check, just because Embiid was not healthy for that playoff series. And if it's, I don't want to just rematch up the teams that played against each other, but I do think you'd feel a little better about Denver and Minnesota overall than you would about Philly and New York, but it is close. And again, New York is a lingering team, make a move team. I know Anunoby I don't know if he'll test the free agent market, but I know other teams will definitely try to lure him away from New York. So is there a small bit of uncertainty with Anunoby, like 2%, maybe, but if you have a fully healthy Embiid for the playoffs, and then again, the Sixers just with the cap space to be able to do something. And I think this offseason, which is really what the vibe check is for going into this offseason, I think the Sixers my guess is the Sixers would have a little more dramatic change to their roster than what the Knicks would do. I would assume the Knicks want to get healthy, especially with not even having Randall at all for the playoffs, get healthy, run it back. And then maybe if you want to start making moves in season at the deadline, maybe look for that. But my guess is going into the offseason, Philly would look more dramatic. Maybe. So I would assume, again, even if we're saying they don't even bring in a superstar player like Paul George and just add a couple of high-level role guys, their team's going to be better. It's going to be healthier. And I would have a hard time picking against him, especially with what he did limping around against that Knicks team already. So I would have the Sixers and then the Knicks. And then I would still have the Lakers right here. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty. The coach just got fired. Are they going to get JJ Redick as the head coach? Like, there was reports today that they said they're going to pursue like role guys versus a star player, which maybe is just a theme of the offseason for the cap, like we're saying with all these teams outside of Philly. Obviously, part of that is the Tyrese Maxey impending contract. But again, I think with just the sort of basketball fan math that you do where this team beats that team and this team beats that team and this team beats that team, like with as close as all of these teams have been in these playoff series, I still think the Lakers are right in the mix if they're just able to add, and I don't want to say, maybe add a miracle piece is too strong, and maybe a miracle piece away is not just put them in the mix. I get it. But, I'm just still not counting LeBron out until he proves that he's not an all NBA level guy. It was funny. I was thinking about because he made the third team All NBA again this year. And it's like, okay, LeBron is clearly like, I don't want to say fallen off. Bear with me here if I'll lay it out. I'll clarify what I'm saying. But I was like looking at some of the other older basketball reference pages, like Kareem, for example, where you get the last couple of years, they tail off. Like there's some all-star years where he's not like an all NBA guy. And then, where he kind of the last couple of years is just kind of hanging around. Garnett has his run. I think Duncan was like making all NBAs pretty much all the way up until the end, and all-stars as well, too. His last season, yeah, he didn't make anything, but his second to last season, he was still getting MVP votes. He was 10th in MVP voting, 8th. He was third team All NBA his last season in the league. So it is kind of Duncan-esque for LeBron, where it's like the drop-off for LeBron in his career has been from first team All NBA to third team All NBA is what we're talking about. And again, where you get like, not to, just like a drive-by shooting, and it's not a drive-by shooting, but where you get like Melo, for example, takes a different role at the end of his career. Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade as well too. Just like, the other guys from his draft class, Chris Paul, basically every other veteran guy that has ever been in basketball ever. It's just the cycle of basketball. I mean, and I would do it too. I would play basketball as long as you possibly could until the league just like, no, we're good. Go ahead and go into the broadcasting booth. I mean, I would sign me up. I would do it 100%. But Brady, it's an all-time great thing. But LeBron, the dip in his career has been from first team All NBA to third team All NBA. So as long as he's still in that range, you have Anthony Davis, and I think they're going to be the problem is, like we're saying, the mental thing against the Nuggets, where if they have to face the Nuggets in a playoff series, I don't know if they can get over the hump at that point. But against Minnesota, Edwards is terrifying at this point in the playoffs now. Maybe, again, just the Cat and Gobert defensive thing, it can be a tricky matchup at times, but I think the Lakers can make that series interesting. Again, OKC is going to be a year better, so maybe this was the year to catch them if you're LA, but at least I still think they're hanging with all these teams. So again, is the call for role guys, does that mean they're bringing in Bronny James? Who knows? But, a happy LeBron is not the worst thing in the world. And they'll do something else. I don't think they'll be like, okay, we've got Bronny, now we're good. I think Bronny would just be a part of the offseason. If Bronny was going to the Lakers, I've got the Pelicans next. And the next couple of teams that I have are younger teams. I've got Pelicans, Magic, and Pacers. And the reason I would have the Pelicans over these teams, and this is going to be a theme with maybe the rest of the teams on this list, but with what we saw from Zion, I would still have Zion over the other young core guys on this team. So if it's Zion versus Halliburton and Zion versus Paolo is really close. And Paolo is, if we're talking bigger picture basketball, currently he's on a rookie contract, makes him also a little younger. Those things have to factor into it. Also, a little less experienced as well too. Not saying with the games played that Zion has, he is the most experienced, but just with what he had showed in that, especially in that Lakers playing game, maybe maybe we knock the Lakers down on the vibe check a little bit. Maybe they lose that game if Zion is able to stay healthy. But again, they're still in the mix with all these teams, and Zion's health is a factor as well too. So I would still bet on the talent that he showed, but I get it if you'd want to put the Magic in Paolo and Franz. And again, maybe they add a guy like KCP or, Klay Thompson. They're still a better team if they bring in Klay Thompson. So we're not saying the Magic are vaulting up past even the Knicks and the Sixers at that point, but against, their Western Conference counterparts, maybe they look better, the better mid teams in the conference. But I go Pelicans, Magic, Pacers, and that's a Paolo Halliburton thing as well too, which was definitely, I'm not out on Halliburton after this playoffs by any means. I think I still love him. Like, I don't think he disproved anything to me as a player, but it's like, okay, if we need a guy to be a little bit more aggressive, there's nothing wrong with needing to bring in a secondary scorer. And, they didn't have Mather in this playoff run as well too, which is a big thing that I don't think got brought up a lot, even including by us, where that is a guy who is probably not going to be afraid to go get a bucket in a big situation. Him next to Halliburton, why they drafted him, he's kind of the perfect counterpart. Do they get a Jarris Walker resurgence in year 2 as a big addition? So again, if you want to knock the Pelicans, and there's also some fray with, is fray even the right, is that the right use of that word? There's also some questions about what will happen with Brandon Ingram in the offseason, just some bigger fit pieces, CJ McCollum, but I'll still pick Zion. So we kind of, and I guess I feel like my list has a theme. You got the teams that are like going to run it back, be, assumed, is that even a word? Assumed contenders again next year in OKC, Denver, Minnesota. You've got the teams that could potentially, be in the mix, but also make big moves in the Sixers, Knicks, and Lakers. You've got trendy young teams in the Pelicans, Pacers, or Pelicans, Magic, and Pacers. So I feel like we kind of dip now into the older teams that are too expensive, and we just have no, I guess I was going to say we have no idea what's going to happen, but we're kind of capped out and we might know exactly what's going to happen. I've got Bucks, Suns, Heat, Clippers, and then I got the Cavs last. We'll get to the Cavs, obviously, when we get to them on the list. But the Bucks, and again, saying like pick the team over the player, Bucks, Suns, Heat, Clippers. I'm still taking Giannis over everybody on those teams. You get Durant, you get Booker, Butler, Kawhi. I'm still taking Giannis. So Giannis currently on Milwaukee. Milwaukee's got the best vibes for that reason amongst these teams. But again, this team kind of is what it is. And Doc Rivers is the coach. It is, I don't know what they're, I think they're going to be, if they're the 2-3 seed, even the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference next year, I don't think we would all be totally shocked. And I'll be honest, I can definitely see myself in this offseason talking myself into Dame Lillard. The off-court stuff, put that aside. He's a year removed from that. Maybe he starts to, maybe that clears up for him in his head. And then on the court, he's able to get back to a way that he was able to, and just his comfortability in the city. I can definitely talk myself into Dame Lillard playing better in year 2 in Milwaukee, in the full year in the Doc Rivers system. We know you love a full year in the Doc Rivers system, I guess, if you get that full year. But I could see that, and that's another reason why I would have him above these teams. But still, this team from a roster standpoint kind of is what it is. We'll do the Milwaukee trade machine, the Bucks trade machine, and see what we can come up with and try to fix the Bucks. But the Suns, again, Durant, Booker, you're taking that over Butler and Bam. But I would, if you wanted to just say Heat culture, and Eric Spoelstra is the most important thing, I don't think I wouldn't take Spoelstra over Giannis. I don't know. Do we need to do a poll? Would you rather start a team with Eric Spoelstra or Giannis? I feel like that's kind of a close one. Eric Spoelstra, again, is definitely proved his worth, but the players always, I feel like, kind of rule the day. So, even Spoelstra over Durant. We'll throw Durant in the poll as well, too. Maybe we'll throw Kawhi and PG as a combo in the poll. Go to the Rem and Sam YouTube and see if we throw it up there. I think we're at Rem and Sam Podcast on the YouTube feed. And I think on Instagram, we are just at Rem and Sam. But if you guys want to stay tuned to the feeds, the links are also in the description. But so just for the player, I would have Durant and Booker over Spoelstra, in my opinion. And, there is also what happens with Jimmy Butler. Maybe, again, maybe it's not bad vibes if they trade Jimmy Butler. Like, they could definitely get good value for him and set the franchise in a different direction. But just, I guess my vibe check is, how close are you to winning the title, again, going into this offseason and then for the upcoming season? So not like who's in a position to build the next thing for the next 5-10 years, whatever. And, maybe OKC, Denver, the next 5 years is still, kind of top of the list. But, OKC maybe definitely top of the list of all these teams. But, for winning the title next year, just because of, I guess I would say I'm probably 10% right now on whether or not Jimmy Butler gets traded. And that's probably up a little bit from when we were talking about it with Sam. So, just because of that, in terms of winning the title, we'll see what happens. And I think I would still have the Clippers or the Heat over the Clippers at this point. And the Clippers, speaking of like Spoelstra and Heat culture, the Clippers did just re-sign Tyronn Lue. So they got him down, locked him down to an extension. So that is a big deal from a culture standpoint. And if they want to reset, and let's just say we don't know what players are going to be there and they want to go in a different direction. Like if Ty Lue is committed to that franchise, regardless of what they do, and as long as, they've taken care of him as well, too, I'm sure that would help the commitment. But if he's locked into whatever direction they want to go, then having him there is a big piece as well, too. So I guess that does separate them between the Cavs. And if we're throwing them in the mix between the Suns and the Bucks, like, I think Doc would be the fourth coach out of all these guys. I kind of like Coach Bud on the Suns. I think that'll be interesting. I think he's a better fit than Vogel. I don't know if Coach Bud, I'm not saying is the end all be all coach fix for Phoenix by any means. But I do think he is a better fit, like I'm saying, than Vogel. The defensive stuff. And Vogel was a good fit for what LA had there, too, especially considering, Rondo, Caruso, like we're saying, KCP, LeBron, just a brilliant basketball mind, can do whatever he wants both ways. Durant, brilliant defender. Like, that team was a defensive team that was perfect for Vogel, and maybe going, hey, can we bring in a defensive guy to offset the offensive stuff that this team could do is an interesting thought. But I am very curious and optimistic about what this Coach Bud team could be with Phoenix in terms of it being better than last season anyways. But Tyronn Lue would still take him over all those guys. But just it feels like Paul George is really open to leaving. And now if you're just left with Kawhi and James Harden, and if Paul George leaves, like James Harden is, maybe he wants to just be in LA, and LA is a hard place for guys to leave. I forget who made this point. Maybe it was Shannon Sharp on First Take. It was one of the First Take guys. It was either him or Windhorst, but they were saying nobody's ever left. None of the star players ever left the Lakers. Like Shaq was traded from the Lakers, but nobody's ever been like, okay, I'm good. My time in LA is up. I'll go sign somewhere else. Like none of the ever major big guys. So maybe Harden just goes, no, actually, I kind of want to be in a little bit of a better situation. Maybe not to keep mentioning the same teams. Orlando, I don't know. He's not going to go rejoin Philly, obviously, with Morey, but maybe the Clippers are his best bet in general. But if Paul George is gone, maybe he's more open to leaving. And then, Kawhi, who knows what happens there. So, the Clippers, I think, is a reasonable spot for them on the vibe check. And, this is still them above the top half of the leagues or the bottom half of the league. So we're not mixing in the non-playoff teams here. And maybe they, we would take the Spurs over the Clippers in the vibe check. But, I think they're still in a middle portion of the league in terms of vibes. And then the Cavs are, in terms of winning the title, obviously for next season, the lowest team on the vibe check. And I wouldn't even say that the Cavs have bad vibes. Now, again, not to continue on the coaching trend, but the Bickerstaff firing was a little head scratching. So maybe, maybe I need to reconsider what I just said. But and I forget which one of the other coaches had said it, but they were like, he'd done a really impressive job with the culture there. So maybe it's a little Mark Jackson-y. Do we get a guy with the X's and O's and a little more, do we just go a different direction? I think, Kenny Atkinson was the name that was being floated around. We love Kenny Atkinson here on the Rem and Sam pod. We want him to get another shot. So I do kind of like that. So maybe I'm back in on the where I was saying with the Cavs. Like, it's not totally bad. It's not totally bad vibes if they hire Kenny Atkinson to replace JB Bickerstaff. There we go. We got it figured out. If they bring in Kenny Atkinson, we're back in on the Cavs. But, for winning the title, this is probably going to be a reset season for the franchise. And if they choose Donovan Mitchell over Darius Garland, then maybe they're they're more back in on contending than trying to get younger. But I think I would assume they would go with Garland just because of Mobley's age. And Allen as well, too. They're going to shop. So, maybe they feel like just Mobley's ready to go now. Mitchell can contend now, and just the timeline. Maybe they can talk themselves into that timeline. But I feel like they'd want to line up the ages with Mobley and Garland. And, once Mitchell gets his contract, maybe, they could probably get a little bit of a bigger package pause for Mitchell as well, too. It could be close, but maybe a little bit bigger for Mitchell. So again, I'm not saying the Cavs have totally bad vibes, but for winning the title, they're obviously going to be down the list. And in my heart of hearts, would you rather be the Cavs or the Clippers right now? If you're trying to win, the title next season, I think you need to be the Clippers, just because you'd have to really do a hard spin pivot to get the Cavs like contending. But you're also in the Eastern Conference next year. I feel like, should we make this a homework assignment for ourselves? Could we theoretically flip the Cavs into contenders with just like a series of moves and make them better than the Clippers? It might be possible. It might be possible. We'll report back. Would you rather be the Cavs or the Clippers if you're trying to win the title next season? Now, if we get, say, if we get like, hey, you're signed to a contract, you get whatever to just go build a contender, then to reset with the Cavs, maybe the Cavs are a way easier choice at that point over the Clippers. You still have good trade assets with the Clippers, and you're in LA too as well with Ballmer, more money from an owner. Though Gilbert is a rich owner and has the means to spend, doesn't mean he necessarily he hasn't proven that he's done it, obviously. But Ballmer spends, you get the LA market. Like we said, Tyronn Lue is there. Maybe Kenny Atkinson. We'll see what's possible. Maybe you'll never hear of it again. But that's the vibe check for the teams that got eliminated from the NBA playoffs this year. So we got OKC, Denver, Minnesota, the Sixers, New York Knicks, the Lakers, Pelicans, Magic, Pacers, Bucks, Suns, Heat, Clippers, and Cavs. So do we go to the corners? Oh, no, wait. There was another sporting event quick this weekend that I did want to talk about. Okay, I misspoke a little bit earlier when we will get out for some of these sporting events. We do have some fun stuff happening this weekend. UFC, we got Islam versus Dustin Poirier. I hope it's a really fun matchup. The thing is, Poirier always gets in fun fights. Okay, yeah, UFC 302. I had to double check. I had UFC 302 written down. So good, we got it correct. But Poirier always entertaining, and as I said before, I'm a McGregor guy. I'm stuttering through that one, but I'm a McGregor guy. I've always been a fan of him. So when Poirier has been 2-0 versus McGregor is tough for me as a fan rooting for Poirier. But I've definitely, again, just the entertainment value of his fights and just him in press conferences and interviews. I've come around on Poirier. He's a good dude, and I hope he's able to hang with Islam in this fight, because Islam right now, pound for pound, number one, and it feels like I want to say he was like a minus 600 favorite against Poirier as well too. So Poirier at those long shot odds, maybe just go for it, just screw it, and he catches him on some kind of swing. So just he starts swinging crazy and gets him wobbling, because the one time he did lose was the one time Islam lost, he did get knocked out or TKO'd, but he got punched. And then Volk was able to get him stumbling in the first fight as well too. And I'm not remembering if Oliveira was able to get him when he lost to Islam. Islam ended up beating him on the ground, if I remember correctly. And I don't remember if Oliveira was able to knock him down. But then again, I don't remember if Volk technically got a knockdown in that fight, but I remember he did definitely get him stumbling. So, Poirier, his boxing, as Daniel Cormier was talking about the fight, he said his boxing obviously is better than Islam's. And, he was saying his striking at first, just in general, like his stand-up game, but then he narrowed it to his boxing specifically, which, when you're talking about MMA, it's mixed martial arts. And, you really, when you start getting like technical like that, it's like, okay, we realize how great of a fighter Islam is, that DC has to go down to the specific subgenre of like a stand-up game to be like, okay, yeah, his boxing is better than Islam's. But again, there is a shot. And yeah, he got Oliveira with a triangle arm choke in the second round, but he lost to Adriano Martins with a punch in the first. And I remember watching that fight not too long ago, or at least watching the highlight of that knockout. And it's not like he's like unconscious, if I remember correctly. Like, he definitely gets him pretty good, but it's not like he was just out to sleep. Like, I think Islam got Volk in the second fight a little bit better than Islam himself has gotten. And he has been a pretty active fighter as well, too. So if there is one thing that he might have going against him, it might just be the miles that he's racked up at this point. And he you know, he's had some quick finishes. Pause. I'm looking through the Wikipedia right now of his fight pages, but he's been pretty consistently fighting, like, you know, 2-3 times a year, just depending on how it kind of lines up. But when he got the belt from Oliveira in October 2022. So he fought in October, fought in February 2023, fought in October 2023, and now he's fighting in June. So, okay, you know, he's getting a little bit of an extended-ish break there between this fight and the last Volk fight. You know, that first Volk fight went 5 rounds, but he got Volk in the first, Oliveira in the second. Bobby Green, going back to February 2022, he got him in the first. October 2021. In 2021, he fought 3 times. So he didn't fight at all in 2020. Then since then, he's been, 3 times in 2021, and then pretty consistently 2 fights a year. So this is a very steady pace for Islam. And again, you know, he's defended the belt twice. This will be his 3rd defense of the belt. So 3 title fights from him. This will be his 4th title fight. So it's not like he's had the long legacy of title fights. I think he's going to be tied for Khabib for the division if he wins this one. But, you know, if you start going like John Jones, like, we get it. I'm just saying the overall miles that he's had recently has, you know, been quite a bit. So I know Poirier got knocked out pretty good in the Gaethje fight and was able to bounce back with a win. But Gaethje, you know, that Gaethje knockout was pretty clean. He really got him, you know, and any kind of sort of head kick that you do. And as we know, we learn this is what we're learning as we continue to watch UFC. But, you know, you're obviously setting that head kick up with, it seems like, you know, you're setting that up with the punch from the opposite kick, from the opposite leg. And I don't know if it's necessarily always the opposite, but that's what Gaethje did in that situation. And I want to say that's Edwards was opposite as well, too, on his head kick. That could just be the, you know, obviously you guys can tell I do not take fighting classes. That could just be the obvious physics of, you know, you're not going to throw a punch and then kick on the same side. But fighter, if we've got a fight instructor that wants to slide in the DMs, let us know. We'd really appreciate it. But I'm definitely, like, what I'm saying is I'm definitely not counting Poirier out, but it would be a very historic upset, I think, if he wins this one. And the other reason I'm not counting him out as well, too, is because Strickland did just beat Adesanya. And Adesanya was a little bit more farther along into his run as a fighter than where Islam is at right now. But it's just kind of like anything could happen in the UFC right now. And it's always been that way. But with just the amount of, with how stacked a lot of these divisions are right now, it just seems harder, and again, in some of these divisions, to maintain the belt for as long as these other guys have done it in the past. And that's it. You know, that's why it's as impressive as it is that Islam is defending the belt like he has. And I guess, you know, the 2 title defenses that he's had has been against Volk, who's a guy that's not even in his own weight class, but still an all-time great fighter and close enough. In Oliveira, an all-time great fighter as well. And I mean, Bobby Green as well, too. I don't know if he's like a UFC Hall of Famer. I guess he's probably still active, but I don't know if he's headed that way, but he's a stud in his own right as well, too. So shout out to Poirier. I feel like my heart will probably be with Poirier this weekend. No, we're rooting for a good fight and rooting for a good card. And, you know, we'll be happy for whatever fighter ends up winning. And again, the competitiveness that I had toward Islam in those Islam Volk fights, I really love Volk. And I was really hoping that, you know, double champ, and he would kind of go up this extra level as an all-time guy. But now Islam is on his turn as being like, okay, I'm here for my all-time status. And I'm on board with it. I really like Islam. And, you know, Khabib as well, too. Again, he beat McGregor. So I had a lot of competitive energy toward Khabib for a while. I should be careful saying this. I don't want to get pinned down if I ever come across walk past Khabib in a hallway. But I'm saying good things here. I'm saying I'm a fan. I'm all in. Love watching the highlights, and I will be excited for whichever fighter ends up winning. But it would be the most chaos. Obviously, would be with Poirier winning. So as we're fans of the UFC, but we're also fans of the Dark Knight and fans of the Joker. So we're agents of chaos here on the Rem and Sam pod. But switching into Piercing Truth. Oh, also, and if you want to make money on that fight, the best way to do it is to bet. If you want to bet Islam, bet him by either knockout or submission because the odds are going to be much better. And you could even do like a round fight or like a round, what do they call it? A round method combo parlay where knockout in the third, knockout in the second, whatever. I would say just stick to like Islam by submission. I think that's like minus 120. Not bad. Pretty good odds to get the number one pound for pound fighter to win. If you really want to stick him in I was going to say stick him in a parlay with like some NBA game, but unfortunately you can't do that this weekend. I guess you'll just have to parlay him with could you do a Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Islam Makhachev parlay? Because I think we get a Sky Fever matchup today when this drops Saturday. If you guys are listening to this on Saturday, or if not, go check out the box score and see if Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese actually go check the Instagram is what I would do. Check the Angel Reese's Instagram and see if they won the game against the Fever. If you're listening to this after Saturday, but do the little Islam by submission and find it on BetStamp is my recommendation. But I don't know if we're pivoting into Piercing Truth this one, but I guess this will be we'll officially be in Piercing Truth now with this next thing. But I wanted to mention J. Cole dropped he didn't drop, but he was featured on a song with is it Cash Cobain? Am I saying that artist right? I feel like I'm starting to enter my old guy era with music now, where some of the newer artists, I'm like, who's this guy? How do you say his name? What's going on? Oh, do I like the way that sounds? But he did a feature with Cash Cobain, and this was the first piece of music, obviously, that has dropped since the beef. So he dropped the whole album, but I feel like that is I don't feel like that is technically in that beef timeline. Can we say beef timeline? Is that crazy? But is in the timeline of the beef. So the first piece of music dropped post beef. Drake featured on the Sexy Red album as well too, but I thought it was a little strange that both of those guys, and I was going to say pick the features that they did, and they both have been known for working with these younger artists and, constantly trying to promote the next generation. But to, post beef, and, Drake more so than J. Cole, but J. Cole also threw his name in there a little bit. And to be in this beef where you're like, okay, I'm the greatest rapper of all time. And then your next two features are sort of these, I don't want to say not serious features, because in that, that's just, fun beats. If it's a fun listen, like it is what it is. Like a good song is a good song. I'm not going to sit here and say just because there's not 17 layers to the lyrics, like it's not a good song. But again, a post beef, like we're less than a month out from, or I think maybe today or yesterday was like the month anniversary from when Euphoria dropped. J. Cole has been like on this for the last like couple years now, going back to the build up to the off season when he dropped that album, and then now the build up to this next album, the Fall Off. And part of this beef was, he has been making his claims as the GOAT rapper, but not just making the claims. Like that has been that's been like the theme of basically every verse that he's been doing. And he's always been sneaking it in and managing to bring it up. And again, it's just been a real thread through what he's been doing the last couple of years. And even like, on the London feature and just all that stuff, he's always constantly talking about it. Like the Dreamville, when Dreamville did the album for Creed 3, Heaven's EP is all about him and his status as the greatest rapper. It's also him about, trying to confront his own, like what he has to offer now in the game. I get all that too, but it is also him constantly bringing up his status is the GOAT. And I don't even think he mentioned that once in this feature. And I don't know when this feature was recorded. Maybe it was recorded before and it just dropped. Now, I don't know the timeline for this stuff. I guess I could probably look it up, find out it's probably out there. So maybe this doesn't apply. But I just was like, are we on a pivot now for where J. Cole is going? Hopefully we're not on a pivot for where he's going with his music. And I think the fall off is pretty much, I would assume it's pretty much done. Maybe he's still workshopping it, maybe it's still not perfect yet, which is why he's teasing it out. And I would assume that he's not going to back off of that theme that he was starting. And it's always, his chase for the top has always kind of been what he's been rapping about. But really in the offseason, he was kind of like, okay, my status is here. And in 7-Minute Drill as well, too, I thought the interesting thing that in his approach with that song was, and I know him dissing the Kendrick discography didn't go over well in some of the different disses, but to basically admit hey, you had your moment, but now I had mine, where, a lot of it is, and as diss track should be, it's like, oh no, I'm the best, but there is still an authenticity to it where he was like, yeah, this is now me making my ascension. And just, again, did not have any of that in the most recent feature that he did. I thought was super interesting. And, Drake is still kind of poking his nose in there, dropping bars over the BBL Drizzy beat. But I did think it was an interesting verse from J. Cole. He's, Cash Cobain. Again, it's more of a newer generation type of song. If that's the right way to put it, I want to say. I don't know what the new term for trap, I don't know what the new genre type stuff that people are listening to, what it's technically called, but it's, I get maybe he's just knows what his audience is at that point and is just playing to that. And that is a smart move as well, too. I just thought it was an interesting thing to do. The first move post that, 7-Minute Drill in that Might Delete Later album. But overall, it was a pretty good month of music. We got some pretty strong albums this month, and can never complain about that. So I know the Ghostface Killer album was pretty solid. The Kanye feature on that has been pretty heavy in my rotation. But should we do a live check-in on the we missed the end of the who was playing before? The Mystic and the New York Liberty. We're still learning, WA fans. Don't get mad at us. It's our first year trying to really get locked in. It looks like of course, the Liberty were able to pull away in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter. We missed the fourth quarter. They outscored them 20-12. Let's see if we can get a Leah Edwards stat update. 15 minutes tonight, 7 points, 2 for 6 from the field, 3 for 4 from the free throw line. Trying to make her impact. Brianna Stewart, 18 and 15. Sabrina Ionescu, 24. Jonquil Jones, 16. Thornton, shout out, 20 points tonight. Doing her thing. So we've got Diana Taurasi in Phoenix playing against Minnesota. Oh, Minnesota. Okay, so, Dallas is the Wings. See, I'm still trying to get all this stuff straight. Minnesota is the Lynx. So the Wings and the Sun were the other national TV game earlier. And we've got the second national TV game tonight is Phoenix, Minnesota. Should we do we need to mention in Piercing Truth. We can't call ourselves a sports podcast and not mention Darren Waller dropping a diss track on Kelsey Plum. I guess it's a diss song, which I don't know. The athlete singer crossover is I feel like a little more rare than the athlete rapper crossover. But regardless, I mean, Darren Waller's still putting up bars. Is this my initial reaction to watching this was like, is this how much auto-tune a normal person needs to sound good? You hear normal people, you have friends, people in your life that are good at singing. But once you record, anybody knows, once you record something, it just, especially with singing as well too, talking, recording, talking, everybody know it distorts a little bit, on your phone, your voice definitely sounds a little bit different. Everybody's voice to themselves sounds different, but even through a phone and all that stuff, your voice is going to sound, it's a little distorted, obviously, but the singing recorded distortion versus in person. And it can be different too, because like, once you give like maybe it's just like the microphone, because you get like a live performance, like, and then you can go really bad sometimes as well too, with people that you're like, okay, we thought they were a good singer, but I guess the singing microphone combination is whack. And Darren Waller, for him, I guess, I don't know, was that effect like planned, where they like, we just need to crank up the reverb on this? But honestly, dude, it's got Darren Waller. You're going crazy. You need to settle down, bro. Like, and not even, I want to, like, the news about the relation, like, I guess, we don't want to say too much about the relationship, but I feel like, though really soon. And well, we're saying too much, but the song itself I didn't even know Darren Waller had a Spotify, but I think he's got, well, let's see here. Let's look up the Darren Waller Spotify. 15,000 monthly listeners for Darren Waller, 15.2K. Shout out. The latest single, Who Knew, which is the one we're talking about, Who Knew, is not featured on the popular section of his page. But it looks like he's got 2 albums. So Darren Waller has been putting in the work in the studio. Make no mistake, this is not his first go around with auto-tune. Not any features that I can recognize, but he's got a 2021 album with a feature from an artist named Max with 2 X's. Are we about to find out that Max Crosby is also a rapper? Okay, there's no information on the page. Okay, we're going to have to listen to this and see if it sounds like Max Crosby. Unfortunately, I don't think the mic is going to be able to pick it up. For some reason, this mic does not pick up that sound very well, but like background noise. It could probably the Zoom, but should I just sit here silent while I listen to this song? This one feels a little less auto-tuned. No, this is not. Okay, it's not Max Crosby. I don't want to sound like, it's not. I'm not saying it's not a white guy. I'm just saying it's not Max Crosby. It does not. It sounds like a younger kid than Max Crosby. But he has not had any crazy features, because I think Antonio Brown, if I'm not mistaken, who also a rapper, or I guess, is what do we call Darren Waller? Just like R&B? I guess this other song, Gotta Go, this sounds a little like rap. No. It's kind of like that, like, I guess it's pop rap, like that Post Malone type stuff. But I feel like Antonio Brown got like a Rick Ross feature at one point on one of his albums. Okay, if we find Antonio Brown has also dropped a lot of music as well, too. I guess a lot of singles. But yeah, a whole lot of money. 3rd song on Antonio Brown's album, Himothy, the 2020 pandemic release from Antonio Brown. Also a couple of YD the Beast features. But yeah, I mean, he got Rick Ross. So, I feel like that might be the best feature get of anybody. Let's check the Dame Lillard feature list and see, or Dame Dalla, excuse me, is the artist name. Dame Dalla's gotten some good people. Oh, okay. He's got Snoop Dogg on a feature. Are we going to have to do the deep dive on the NBA artist crossover, the athlete artist crossover, add some of these songs to our Spotify? Okay, Dame Dalla. Never mind. Dame Dalla still might be the top one. We got Lil Wayne. We got, a bunch of people here. Q-Tip, Snoop Dogg. That's just all on the 2021 album. Different on levels the Lord allowed. Shout out Dame Dalla. Is that who's on the cover? Oh, I guess that's probably just Dame on the cover art. Dame has way more albums. 1, 2, 3, 5 albums at this point, plus a deluxe for the Big Dollar album in 2019. I shouldn't just. Am I just not? You guys probably already know all the athlete music stuff. I feel like I'm just catching myself up. I'm not catching you guys up at all, but that's definitely, his most recent work, he's definitely grown a little bit. Probably his garnered some respect of his peers. But I mean, his second album in 2017, we've got Lil Wayne also. We've got 2 Chainz. We've got BJ the Chicago Kid as well. So Dame Lillard's been pulling his whole career. Dame Lillard's always been able to get Dupree on his first album, Jamie Foxx, Lil Wayne. So, you know, the Lil Wayne Dame relationship runs deeper than I guess most of us know. But on his newest album, also Rick Ross. Rick Ross loves hanging with the athletes, which makes sense. Who wouldn't? Lil Wayne as well, too. So I guess it's just Dame Dollar, Lil Wayne, Rick Ross hanging out. But that's a fun hang. If you guys want to call in sometime, we'll hang on the pod. But I guess we just sit here and wait for the Kelsey Plum response. Is Kelsey Plum drop a response diss track? Maybe we'll IT. Can we produce a beat for Kelsey Plum and send it to her? We'll Kelsey Plum, we'll help you out. Maybe we'll write some lyrics. Maybe we'll just drop the diss song ourselves. Do we just drop a Darren Waller diss song to respond? I don't think. Now, the thing that I didn't get about the song was it was the opposite perspective, which is also just like, I mean, this is like, I don't know if he was like, do I just take Taylor Swift playbook and just crank it up a notch? It's the Taylor Swift was like invading the NFL, and now Darren Waller's trying to invade Taylor Swift's world. And let's just say Taylor Swift is doing it a little bit more successfully than Darren Waller. But that was, unfortunately, we can't play the song, but just go look up Darren Waller, and I'm pretty sure you won't be too far from finding out the Who Knew is the title of the single. And make no mistake, we've given it one listen, and that's about it. Has not, the replay value is not there, but it is I think worth checking out. The music video is worth checking out, though. It's one of those things like, does it deserve the views? Let's see how many views the Darren Waller music video is at right now. I feel like, is it going to be like the Not Like Us? Stephen A, of course, had to give his thoughts. Maybe we'll check that out after this is done. Of course, you know, we're going to turn the Rem and Sam pod off, turn Stephen A on, like we always do. 173K for Darren Waller. Only the real ones have actually clicked on the video. That would actually be crazy. I feel like I'm going to be honest, I didn't even listen to the song. The clip I saw on Instagram was enough. But shout out Kelsey Plum, call in. But hopefully we see Kelsey Plum in that new women's league that Breanna Stewart is starting, the Unrivaled, the Big Three for women's. I guess, you know, Caitlin Clark is going to be in the Big Three after all. It's just going to be Unrivaled in January next year under Breanna Stewart instead of Ice Cube. And instead of $5 million, it's going to be like 500, you know, whatever. It's going to be a big increase for her, make no mistake. I mean, in terms of her on-court salary, she's getting the bag. Off the court, of course. But I guess now, if that's going to be an option, does she play in the Unrivaled, and instead of playing in WNBA, does she play in the Big Three and just get the bag? I feel like she still needs the legacy stuff from the WNBA, the championships, titles, all that stuff. I feel like that's probably what she would want to pursue anyways, because if she wanted the bag, she probably just would have done it anyways. But yeah, anyways, shout out to Kelsey Plum. But again, shout out to Sam. Happy birthday to our guy Sam. It was earlier in the week. His birthday, I believe, was on Memorial Day. Yeah, it was the 20th. The Memorial Day was 27th, right? Yeah, Monday was the 27th. So shout out to our guy Sam. He will be back. Like I said, we still got one more solo mission to do before Sam is back. The typical Rogue Tuesday episodes will be on normal schedule this week. So stay tuned to the feed, and we will be back previewing the NBA Finals and then reacting to Game 1 with Sam when he makes his return. So thank you guys for listening, and have a good night.